Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's just about time to start. So we have four fantastic speakers. So I just ask that you put your microphone on silent so we can just have the speaker so there's no echo and feedback. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar. He will be our first speaker. Each speaker has 30 minutes. You can take all that time, or if you wish to finish earlier, we can have one or two questions. So 30 minutes, and the floor is yours, Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar.
Thanks a lot, Brett. At the outset, I would like to thank KPSI for giving me an opportunity to speak today on a very, very relevant, contemporary, and strategic subject. The role of media and strategic communication is what I'm going to be speaking today. And today we have seen what is happening around us, what is happening in the Ukraine war, and how the prosecution of war in recent times has undergone a paradigm change. Today, the conflicts are being fought over various domains in the cognitive as well as the non-cognitive dimensions. We have seen an emergence of the gray zone warfare, as we call it, with a cyber and a space dimension coming into play, which has made the war waging effort extremely complex. And therefore, uh, it's extremely important that how media can be leveraged to make strategic communication an even more potent weapon in this kind of a scenario. Uh, Strategic communication is an instrument of statecraft which facilitates governments involved in counter-insurgency operation or armed conflicts to influence perceptions, attitudes, beliefs, and behavior of stakeholders, non-state groups, neutrals, competitors, and adversaries in support of the national security policies. It would be therefore be very interesting to see how both strategic communication and media could be synergized to achieve our desired objectives. Before I talk about the synergy of the media, it's important to understand the evolution of the concept of strategic communication. It was basically evolved in the West to understand and engage key audiences for the advancement of national interest, policies, and objectives. We also need to understand that strategic communication is more than a dissemination of information, but it is the active solidation of the stakeholders' perspective. Therefore, in this era of warfare, strategic communication would play a very decisive role. And uh, in the course of my talk, I'll be narrating certain examples in the Ukraine war, how strategic communication has played a very important role. Today, the very nature of security and war doctrines are undergoing a change. We have technologies today like artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, and many others, which have impacted the nations today and how they actually perceive the security threat and what kind of counter measures are required to stay ahead of our adversaries today. The use of narratives, ideas, beliefs, thoughts, and opinions have largely impacted the human mind and often blurring the line. I will I'll repeat this word, blurring the line between a victory and a defeat. Today, you can play with the minds of the soldiers in the battlefield, and you can lower their morale, you can lower their war fighting capability. And enough examples are there in the Ukraine war. Even if I take you to the epic battle of Mahabharata, which is part of the Indian history, the power of narratives was used by Lord Krishna to bring a far superior Kauravas to the knees. So this strategic communication, as we talk about, is not a new concept. It has a new name, certainly, but it was being practiced even a number of centuries before. The other example is of the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War, where the Pakistan army was made to surrender and made to believe they were surrounded by a larger force. So this is also an example how strategic communication was used to play on the minds of the adversaries. Then we had the Kargil War of 1999, where the Pakistani intruders came in and occupied certain heights in Jammu and Kashmir. And here, for the first time, we saw how social media was being used to a great effect to bring about the real-time war situation right into our homes, as a matter of fact, into our bedrooms. And a, a great deal of emphasis was on perception warfare. And I will talk about this perception warfare, because perception warfare has a very close relation with the strategic communication. Today, uh, and we have borders with or hostile borders with China and Pakistan. And a nation, it is not enough only to safeguard the borders and the physical assets, but also the perception of our own people who are prone to be influenced by media. Because opinions are shaped today, issues are discussed, and conclusions drawn. The latest phenomena is the gray zone warfare, which is often played by our adversaries. Uh, and we have recently seen how international media targets the impact to impact the image of our country by its propaganda. I will give you a recent example of Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGER. It's a United States organization which stated that Afghan warlords like Atta Mohammad Noor and Abdul Rashid Dostum were funded by India to create a resistance in the North Afghanistan against Taliban. This report remains silent on India's efforts in bringing up infrastructure development in Afghanistan to the tune of 30 US billion dollars, such as roads, highways, hospitals, dams, and even the Afghan parliament was constructed by India. So you can see a one-sided uh, uh, a narrative being made by an organization, international organization, in an international media. So this is what strategic communication does. And today, any organization, any country, or any nation which succeeds in the occupation of the info space or infosphere battle space, it is going to dominate on each aspect of their foreign policy. Today, we have also seen how strategic communication is weaponizing information. And I want to lay an emphasis on this word, weaponized information. What do we mean by this? It is a psychological warfare. It is basically done where weaker nations don't have the parity in strength with the stronger nation. So to make dividends on shortfall in their war strength, they resort to a weaponizing of information. And I will take the case study of Pakistan's Inter-Public Relations Wing, which you all know is also called ISPR. This ISPR was funded in 1949 by the Pakistan Army. And it was the starting point to give substance to the weaponization of information. The formation in each war, let me tell you, in each war, India has fought with the Pakistan. 4 wars we have fought with them. An attempt was made by the ISPR, to subvert the minds of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And especially in 89, 90, to a great extent, they actually succeeded also. Narratives were made, innovative, cognitive campaigns were launched. And therefore, we see the 3 dimensions here, and I would like you to kindly understand these 3 dimensions of this kind of weaponization of information. It was done under 3 phases. First was diagnostic, second was evaluative, and the third was prognostic. Basically, the ISPR went about the job in these 3 systemic methodologies. China, oh, let me also bring in China here. China has also relied heavily on strategic communication as important to weaken the military resolve of adversity. It is important to understand here because we are here, all geopolitical experts. Any nation's army today relies on 3 intangible factors for success. The first is leadership, the next is training, and the third is morale. So, in case you target any of these 3 aspects of a nation's army, you will weaken that army. Therefore, as early as 1990, we were aware of the Gulf War and the CNN blitzkrieg, which actually happened that time. And China has conceptualized its strategy based on the Gulf War. And it actually called its doctrine a war under informatized conditions. If you read the doctrine of China, a war under informatized conditions, you will be led to a pre-war strategy, which was based on cyber, media, and legal domains. And this doctrine relied on a non-contact warfare. And why I am talking about this non-contact warfare, you would have seen what is happening in Taiwan. You would have seen what is happening in Ladakh in India. It's a non-contact war where bullets have not been fired, but still the enemy has been able to gain a strong vote. It is trying to intimidate a nation by a show of force. And this is what is actually happening in the South China Sea. So now we, we, as a nation, we have tried to bring about a strategic communication structure in our own country. But so far, we are still, as far you can call, in the early stages. So, what is required for a strategic communication approach? It has to be a whole of nation approach. It cannot be a particular department or an organization you create and you expect that organization to do your mandate for strategic communication. It has to be the whole nation gets involved. And one important aspect which I want to bring out here is that once you want to embark on a strategic communication campaign, you need to have a, a communication plan followed by your activities on the ground itself. It cannot be left to the media or to communication. It has to be uh, involving public affairs, public relations, and public diplomacy. Because these three are the fundamental components of synchronization when we talk about a whole of nation approach. So, briefly, now I will come about that what kind of strategic communication model is required. How does a country make a strategic communication model? Because it's extremely important here. Because next I will come to the role of media after this. But first, to understand how do we set up a strategic communication model in a country? The first step for any kind of a model is to establish a sound, strong foundation. And the apex organization has to come up. You can call it a national strategic communication authority, something like this at the national level. And this organization should have the country's best minds on strategic thinking as well as media personalities. So here the synergy actually takes place between strategic communication and the media. Here you have an organization which has experts from a strategic community as well as from the media. And the model has to be built up of what, how, and who. These are the three keywords on which the model is to be actually built. What means we have to decide on the type of communication and the messages which are required to be created. The means of communication to be formulated is the how aspect and the targeted objective. Whom do we actually target as far as our strategic communication is concerned is the who aspect. So now, after having made a model, let us understand how the media can play an important role into this model. In today's contemporary conflicts, both interstate and intrastate, we have seen in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. The very biggest problem is that how do we define the threat? The problem is that you can only target a problem if you identify the problem. So here is an important aspect because from the non-state actors, and this forum has been discussing this subject of non-state actors, it is seen that multiple threats are emerging. So now, how does the media gets leveraged to influence public discourse and shape the conversation?
Excuse me, Dr.
And
Raja, just to
yeah,
say you have 10 minutes to go. And could the people that have just joined us please put your microphone on silent? There's lots of feedback coming through. Please, all of you, put your microphone on
now
silent,
you,
Dr. Raja.
in how
Please
much time
continue,
I
sir.
have to?
10 minutes,
In how
sir.
much
10
time is
minutes.
left for me?
10 minutes, sir. 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Understood. So now, how does media play important role is because media actually gives you effect of a third party endorsement, a, a kind of a neutral party. So when people listen to media, they have an impression that this is a neutral element projecting a viewpoint and does not favor party A or party B. So the first important aspect is the credibility part. So the media, if it is responsible, if it is able to be used in that manner, would be a third party endorsement of your strategic communication, which you want to deliver into the minds of the people. And with a clear communication plan, you have today internet, social media is available. Twitter is there, Instagram is there, Facebook is there, YouTube is there, blog posts are there. So we make the use of all these elements of the media to uh, project a strategic communication. And what happens is that in case we are repetitive in this sort of a thing, all the more better because it actually creates a muscle memory and shapes our thoughts, ideas, and opinions. You see, today we have seen that how media projections of the news events can be manipulated with radical views or by handing out misinformation. And that is why these non state actors are extremely media savvy. They have their own organization which projects their viewpoints and different ideologies. So it's extremely important for a nation to build up a counter narrative to all these things which are actually emerging from the non-state actors. Now I will give you a few examples of the media illustration from the Ukraine war. From the very start, Ukraine quickly framed the war as a David versus Goliath situation. The it projected Russia as a bigger country with a bigger army, and but we always, whenever we see a movie, also we tend to root for the underdog. Even in the portrayal of movies, we rooted for an actor who had all the odds stacked against him. So this actually helped Ukraine to project its cry for help as legitimate, the sovereignty and existence threatened by a neighbor. They took control of this narrative, told the truth, and got the support of the whole world. And uh, Zelensky assumed a Rambo-like image of being a fighter. So, one important aspect which emerged from the strategic communication was there was a lot of support for Ukraine. The Russian viewpoint was not really orchestrated in that manner the way the uh, Ukrainian viewpoint was done. The second aspect where strategic communication was used by Ukraine was releasing a quick fire information about the wins they were getting on the battlefield. They never focused on their losses. Even small wins. even if 2 tanks of the Russian army were destroyed, it was projected in the media straight on. So this improved the morale of the Ukrainian fighters, many of whom were civilians fighting to save their homes. And secondly, on the Russian side, it left a doubt in the mind of the Russian soldier on why he was invading Ukraine. And a third important aspect which Ukraine achieved was it bought the time to secure its support from the West. Within 48 hours, there was uh, a recent video of a S-400 missile defense system which was seen floating on a children's swimming pool balloon and targeting Crimea's Kutch Bridge. So this video, which was started by Ukraine Defense Ministry, garnered billions of views on social media platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So you see that how uh, a natural a thing was made to look and project that the S-400 system of the Russians was such an easy target. It was far from the truth. But this is how the media played a very important role in projecting a strategic communication to lakhs and lakhs of people. Today, we talk about the 21st century, which offers an illustration of a landscape for a new battle of winning the hearts and minds. Insurgents, terrorists, non-state actors are more competitive and more active than ever in creating a master narrative to challenge the state's strategic narrative. So it's important here now because we should bring out these aspects from our deliberations here today that a nation or a state needs to develop a very potent counter strategic narrative, a political credibility, and the legitimacy of a public war. In the absence of narratives, if we don't have these narratives emerging out now, it will open the door to the emergence of counter narratives, which are fundamentally different and prone to different interpretations. The ultimate acceptance and rejection of new stories depends on the frames on which the narratives are developed, and therefore the role of media becomes extremely important because these narratives can be aptly framed and they can change the public perception dramatically by focusing an attention on an aspect of an issue. It is to adopt a media-centric approach in formulating strategic communication strategies as often this would make a difference in the kinetic outcome. And to sum it up, Sun Tzu has said the art of war. To win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. So, in future wars, you will see that there'll be a more focused approach on the strategic communication, and media will play an extremely important role. With this, I have come to an end of my talk. I hope I have been, I have not overshot my time. Thank you very much, Jay.
Big round of applause for Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. So we're pretty much right on the half an hour. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Eddie Cristanto. So your floor is yours, sir, for your presentation. Thank you. Dr. Udi, you are still on mute.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brett. Thank you very much, Apsi, for your invitation to me. Today, I will talk about creating security from the bottom. I will share my screen share. Oh, this is from you, yeah? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Brett. And today I will talk about APSI CDCG program about final updates, creating security from the bottom. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now about the relationship between poverty and insecurity. Next slide. As we know, poverty can create food insecurity. And food insecurity can cause civil conflicts, and civil conflicts can cause national insecurity. And if we talk far away from this, national insecurity can creating international inequality. So poverty and food insecurity leading to national insecurity. So so this talk, I will talk about how to handle poverty and food insecurity in our countries. Next slide. So our program is the community development. So why community development is needed? Slide. This is the slide from European Center for International Political Economy Analysis of Work Development Indicators in June. Sorry, can we back to the slide? Okay, I think I can share from my screen. A minute, I will share from my screen. Okay, I think from this part. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes. From World Bank, this is from World Bank. Many countries around the world continue to experience episodes of violence and conflicts. In these fragile settings, authorities are often unable to provide basic services and social safety needs to their citizens, resulting in terrorist groups seizing the opportunity to establish themselves as alternative to government. And in developing countries, acts of terrorism further erode already precarious economic conditions. Although a terrorist attack may affect only a small fraction of the population and economy, but the negative consequences can be far-reaching. So why we need community development? In this slide, you see the blue line is the GDP in Africa, yeah, in year 1970, and the red line is the relief from NGO from many countries. So at the first time, only small NGO can give them aid or relief. But after 9 or 10 years, the economic become fell down. Yeah, so the economic fell down, and many people only waiting for the relief, the aid. They don't want working. Yeah, and that's why the economic become fell down. So aid not solve the poverty in ideal way. And this is poverty makes wrong mindset. Yeah, fighting poverty is fighting wrong mindset, not only giving money and skill. This is poverty creating crisis creating bad mindset creating low productivity, low income, and back to poverty. This is a cycle that we need to break. But if we only give them money and aid to attack the poverty, that it cannot work. So what we can do, we also need to creating a good mindset. This is some area that our ministry, food crisis come from poverty, force them to do anything to save their families. They need to do anything bad also to get some food for their families. So this is leading to civil conflicts. Yeah, this is some civil conflicts in our area. Yeah, and how our community development can solve the problem. Yeah, we have three major way to solve this. First, we fighting poverty to our program, and we fighting food insecurity and also the mindset transformation. This is the three major that we do from through our community development. So together with us, they got better future. Now we already almost 30 years. This year in October, our program will be 30 years. And about APSI CDCG, this is our way to do the program. So CDCG stand from Community Development Cell Group. Yeah, our goals are mindset transformation and poverty and food crisis reduction. So we have CDCG facilitators. Now we have in 10 countries. We make survey about their potential resourcing in their area. In every country and every area will be different. And we doing community meeting with them. Yeah, now we can do it by online too. And after that, we start the CDCG committee from their community, and we start the program working together with the CDCG community. Now, APSI facilitating this program as a CDCG community committee. Now, and after 2 years, our members become new leaders to reach other area or other country. This is our program. The cycle of the program is 2 years. So we have 7 principles of our community development program. First, we focus on mindset transformation, not only social activities, not only the business, not only making product, but we have bigger goals is mindset transformation. Number 2, we focus on development, not relief. So we develop what they have, not giving what we have. I mean, not giving our money only, not giving our time only, but we focus to develop what they have. And we develop local resources like human resources and natural resources. Number 4, the programs are simple and easy to duplicate by the communities. And the programs belong to the communities, not belong to us. So after 2 years, they still have the business, they still have the project for their communities. And the program run in 2 years in every villages. And after 2 years, we train local leaders to run the program in other villages. So this is the power of multiplication, become the program become bigger. This is some of our survey in some area in Indonesia. And this is community meeting. We do it in every area in Indonesia. And this is a CDCG committee that developed by the communities to work together with us. And this is CDCG weekly meeting. We have about 2 hours meeting every week by online or on site. So we will make the program working together with the APSI from online program, but not possible for us to go for on-site program too. And this is our books. We have 2 books as a curriculum for 2 years, like this. And this after we learning about the books, we teach them how to make product using local resources. And we are growing together as one family in CDCG. This is some of the products. We have about 300 kind of products already market in Indonesia and other countries too. And this is our program, CDCG APSI program. We have APSI Research Institute for Security Studies. We make research. Some of the research is in the product development. So we have patent from the products. Yeah, the patent will be due in New Zealand, and the patent products we will teach our CDCG members to make the products, and the product will run to the market through Asia Pacific Global Foundation will help to market the products. Okay, this is our plan for our CDCG APSI program. Now, I need to announce all of you that CDCG APSI program will start on April 18, 2020. This is every Tuesday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Indonesian Jakarta time. And this is maybe only Asia that's suitable for Asia because the time zone is similar. But for other time zone area like Europe or other countries, we will start the second program on June 2020. This is from me, and I love to discuss with you all. And I think you can send me question or suggestion. Okay, thank you very much, Brett.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eddie. We really appreciate you showing us how to be part of the solution and not part of the problem to solve those world problems like hunger, for example. So that was a very short and succinct presentation. If you do have questions, either raise your hand or write them in the in queue. But since we have a bit more time, Major General Rajan, are you still there? Major General, are you still with us, or have you finished?
Oh, no, I'm there, very much there.
Major General, I'd like to ask you a question. Obviously, it's a balancing act. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And when we have crackdown on media that raises the allegation of state control, whether it's like North Korea, for example, there is just one state media. Though even in New Zealand, we have $50+ million given to the government, which had a particular narrative which is concerning. So how do we strike the balance? Because we do need balanced media, but all media seems to be unbalanced nowadays, seems to be almost like driving for a sports team. And so how can we control that balance, allowing a healthy democracy to have, I'll use the word dissident, to be able to make sure that there is not a totalitarian form of control going on from the government by saying the other side is fake news? How do we strike the balance, sir?
Brett, a very, very searching question, which I think answers are there with all of us. But the problem is the implementation of these measures. I totally agree with you that the media today is more or less state controlled because of various reasons, because of funding, because of finances, because of ideological issues. And you go across any part of the world, you will find that most of the media is state controlled. So how do we change this? Because we are talking, when we talk about strategic communication and media, one aspect which I had raised was credibility. So this credibility aspect has to come in a big way as far as media is concerned, because they're supposed to be a kind of a neutral body, not taking sides, because there will be issues uh, where at times the media will be required to comment against the policies of the state, because they will be certain areas where certain corrective measures are required. So I feel to make this happen, we need to have a regulatory authority. We need to have a regulatory authority in each country who has a kind of independence, and they don't get influenced by a government or any kind of a pressure. And they need to regulate the media. In case a particular media house is not conforming to the norms as such, then that kind of penalties have to be imposed on these media houses, which unfortunately today there is no regulatory mechanism available. And if you want the media to be responsible in reporting, then possibly some kind of regulation has to be put into place, where the government of India must decide. Brett.
Thank you very much for the insightful answer. And the question is going to be asked by Brigadier Kuldip Singh, who is our next speaker. I see your hand is raised, sir. Please take your microphone, turn it on, and please ask your question, sir.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Brigadier Kuldeep Singh from India. It's such a privilege to be amongst this august gathering. I have less of a question, but more of an observation. I think the media in India, let's talk about India or in many other countries, initially was always state controlled. For example, in India, we had the Doordarshan. It was state controlled. However, in those days, the caliber of people who were manning the media, as also the political class, there was a certain amount of ethical moorings that they abided by. In those days, for example, 15, 20, 30 years back, Doordarshan, which was state controlled, just gave you the news. For example, they would just tell you there's been an air crash, 200 people dead, and such celebrity has been blessed with a son or something like that, and they left it at that. And they left you to do the interpretation. If you had a relative on the flight, cry. And if you were related to the celebrity, well, go and celebrate. Or a politician, you went and celebrated. Today, the media is not giving news. The problem is that the media is not giving news. Most of them are giving fake news and indulging in rabble-rousing and perception management, which is not their charter. And this only happens on account of two reasons. The first reason is that today most of the media houses need to make money. The money comes from advertisements, and it is advertisements go to people who have the highest TRP. So therefore, the TRP determines what content they put out. If the people want trash, if the people like trash, the media purveys trash. That's one. Second is the absolute lack of spine in some of the media houses. So those are the two reasons that I didn't have a question. I had an observation. So everybody is available to make a counter comment to that. Thank you.
Brigadier Singh, thank you for your insight. I've worked in media for 15 years and I endorse it's a problem all around the world now. So it's become commercialized, and many companies, big companies like Vanguard and BlackRock control media companies, but they also own vaccine companies. So that becomes problematic when you have big companies owning a variety of companies and controlling the narrative. Thank you for your observation, sir. Dr. Eddie, how are things going in Indonesia? We'd like to talk about your success, sir, because you have this plan and it sounds wonderful. How much success have you had over the years since implementing these strategies?
Okay. Thank you. In Indonesia, we have some factors about the success. First, about the economic. So after we served the communities about 1 year, so they got the community changings. So the community become bigger. They can send their son or daughter to the school. They have enough food, and they have better health. Also, their mindset also transformed to better ways. In Indonesia, we also facing some terrorism in Indonesia. And after CDCG reached a lot of our brothers with different religions, and they have different thinking about their other brother or sister in Indonesia, like that. So we got mindset transformation, also economic changings, and poverty alleviations, like that, Brett. We do it already now today. This year in October we will be in 30 years, and last about 7 years. CDCG also we do CDCG also in other countries. Now we already have 10 countries with CDCG, and I hope through APSI this benefit of CDCG also also can reach other countries in especially in APSI members. Okay, thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Dr. Eddie. So without further ado, I'd like to open the floor for Brigadier Kuldip Singh to do his presentation for 30 minutes. Then we may have some time for some more questions before our final guest speaker from the Malawi Parliament joins us. All being well, it's a very early start in Africa. So Brigadier Singh, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll begin by speaking about the rise of non-state actors. Now, we always had, history tells us that we have always had non-state actors in some form or the other. But two main reasons have been responsible for their rise. One is the improved speed of communications. As you're well aware, communications tend to travel at the speed of the message that is used for transporting that medium, or the medium that is being used for transporting that message. So there is instant awareness of events. There's also a shift towards globalized multipolar world, and a desire and ability to intervene in events in order to influence various aspects. Now, various non-state actors are also involved in influencing a wide range of policies, which range from domestic type of government and governance models, personal freedoms, human rights, on energy, environment, defense, external and foreign matters, etc. They also contribute to decisions, but do not have any direct or a formal role in decision making or the finalizing of policies. Instead, they work through influence. Their participation is also regulated, for example, through the rules of procedure, accreditation that are prevalent in that country. Now, on account of diverging goals and underlying motivations, non-state actors cannot be grouped into one standard category, but may be broadly divided into about 10 broad groups. The first group is your NGOs. Then you have global organizations, multinational business consortiums, the media, journalists, influential experts who appear on the media, including from the scientific and technological community, from farmers, etc., and all that. Then you have social media. The sixth one is the interest groups, lobbying firms, hate groups, private military organizations or PMCs, private military companies, and lastly, the terrorist organization. Now, I am not going to talk at the level of the Indian Army or the country or China, Pakistan, etc. I'm going to talk at a slightly higher level and in a broad generic way. Okay. Please note that the International Committee for Red Cross is neither a IGO, that's an intergovernmental organization, and it's neither an NGO, but it's a unique institution. So therefore, that's one reason we have not included the ICRC in the list of non-state actors. Now, there are certain reasons that the government should engage with most non-state actors. The first reason is that most non-state actors have stakeholder expertise, and their knowledge enriches the intergovernmental decision-making processes. They also tend to add transparency and legitimacy to government policies. It also allows voices of the marginalized and those most likely to be directly affected by various policies to be heard. And also, finally, in the case of certain non-state actors, the government engagement can facilitate a swifter end to a, festering problem or, violence. Okay, so the broad levels of engagement with the government are happening or tend to happen in three broad, settings. One is the setting of the agenda. Now, this relates to the initial meetings between the non-state actors and the government, and it is this stage is involved in the shaping of broad policy, etc., and all that. The next step is the shaping of decisions by the government. Now, at this level, there are policy deliberations leading to decision making, which is accompanied by transparency and access to information, which the government has to, submit to or share with the non-state actors, so better decisions can be reached. And the last stage is the implementation. Now, this implementation, for example, in the case of terrorists or hate groups, may be against the non-state actor. Or in the case of, for example, NGOs, lobby groups, it may be in conjunction with the non-state actor. So depending on the non-state actor, the implementation progressed. Now, there are various methods of functioning that non-state actors adopt. Now, because there are different non-state actors, each one has got different motivations, they have different objectives, they have different modus operandi, and different types of interaction, negotiations with the government are the outcome. Now, on account of that, we will have a look at the methodology for each non-state actors. For example, the first one that we'll cover is the NGOs. Now, typical examples of NGOs are Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, Oxfam, and most NGOs tend to be either community-based, that is very, very localized, or citywide, or national and international. You're well aware, NGOs like the Amnesty International, HRW, Reporters Without Borders, Doctors Without, Borders, etc., are international, whereas some of them are either community-based and very localized. Now, in the case of NGOs, largely the motivation to operate is the promotion of a certain social or political cause or the welfare of a target population. Their objective is alleviation of poverty and or disease, the need to assist or the desire to assist social groups of cohorts such as the elderly women or children, assist during crisis, a pandemic or disasters, help societal segments to unite at a grassroots level and find their voice in local and national governments, or malign or overthrow governments. The last one is also one of the functions some lesser known NGOs perform. And what happened in the previous century in South America is an example of that. Now, how do these NGOs interact or negotiate with the government? The first step that they have, like we said, is the permissions for operating in that particular country. After that, they get funding, but at times, this funding can lead to conflict of interest between the NGO, the bureaucrats, and the politicians who are involved in the negotiations and giving permissions. Some NGOs try to make governments accountable to the people or ensure impartial functioning of state organs at grassroots levels. In turn, governments try to make the NGOs accountable to its agenda and to the laws of the land, and to ensure transparency in financial dealings, particularly when receiving funds from foreign sources. Now, the last one is what is happening in many countries nowadays. Many NGOs who were rendering human service, but somehow did not meet the agendas of a particular government in a particular country, are not being allowed to operate or have been targeted and made to shut down. So this is not a good thing, but is a cause for alarm. The next is the most effective way for an NGO to work with the government. The best way is to center the voice of the country's government, implement within existing government delivery and data systems, build relationships with government partners at all levels, and progressively transfer the real ownership of its efforts to government partners in an incremental and progressive manner. Okay. Next, we come down to the second non-state actor that we'll discuss, and those are the global organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, the Munich Security Conference, the World Economic Forum at Davos. Now, their motivation is to lay down a broad code of international economic and security conduct in order to minimize the scope for economic and other types of conflict. They also have a motivation, underlying motivation in certain cases, to increase the influence of donor nation in recipient nation. You are well aware, for example, Pakistan is looking for an IMF loan. And instead of only appealing to the IMF, it's also appealing to the countries which have large SDRs in the IMF. So therefore, this is an indicator that donor nations like to increase influence in the recipient nations in some of these global organizations. The objective of some of these global organizations are, first one, to promote global macroeconomic and financial stability, to boost the shared prosperity, reduce poverty in those nations, as well as raise living standards, promote sustainable development, and also strategic stability, provide policy advice and capacity development. They also have interaction negotiation with the government at basically two levels. The first one is an interaction at the apex levels of government with wide-ranging departments of that government. And the decisions that are derived mutually between the government and the global organization are usually thrust down in the form of economic and political reforms. And these often tend to anger the local politicians and the incumbent governments. Okay. The third the third non-state actor that we'll talk about are the multinational business consortiums like the OPEC, the Gazprom, Microsoft, Shell, Samsung, Alphabet, etc. etc. The list is very long. I didn't have the space or the time to list all of them. Now, their prime motive is profit and resource exploitation. And the objective is to lower production costs in order to sell more and get a larger share of the market, mitigate production and economic risks, as well as enhance their own market power and financial clout. Now, these multinational business consortiums interact and negotiate with the government invariably at apex levels with the central and the state governments when they are trying to get contracts or trying to establish themselves. However, during the interactions and negotiations, there are also cases of nexus with incumbent governments in order to exploit resources in terms of ores, etc., natural resources, manpower, labor laws, as also the bypassing of laws and norms. Now, what is the most effective way for multinational business consortiums to function is to center once again the voice of the country's government, implement within existing laws, keeping the sensitivities of the government, the laws, and the local people in mind, as also build relationships with local entities and people. The next non-state actor that we'll talk about is your media, journalists, influential experts. Now, much has been said by the previous speakers on this, so I will not give it much time. Their motivation today is mainly profit. As was mentioned by me during my observation, today, most of the media houses are being run by private consortiums. Now, in their case, they want to get more and more advertisements because that is their source of money. It's a business model. Now, the advertisements generally go to channels which have the largest TRP. So most of the channels, instead of giving staid news or giving good news, tend to go wild or rogue and give the most negative or fake news in order to grab eyeballs. So that is the general model which is prevalent today. The initial objective of the media was to inform the public as also to hold incumbent governments to account. But now they are increasingly into perception management and information warfare at the behest of certain vested interests. Like, for example, if you notice, suddenly in a country, there will be much talk about how certain weapons do not perform well of a certain country, whereas the counter to them, those weapons of the other country are this, that. And this is discussed by so-called experts increasingly over, let's say, a month or weeks. And this is how a kind of a perception is created that the weapons of a certain country are better than those of another country. The next aspect is the interaction negotiations with the government. Like we mentioned before, in the past, the media gave news and left the interpretations to the viewer. Now, there's an incestuous relationship with political parties, government, security agencies, and the media indulges in perception management as a proactive tool of the government or various business houses. What should be the most effective way of functioning? They should be independent of governmental or business agendas, report honestly, independently, objectively. And that today is one reason that you are seeing that, especially in India, most people are switching off many of the media channels who today have now started asking various people for funding. Increasingly, many people are switching over to things like BuzzFeed or Flipboard or single video channels in which the media gives out a small little video outlining what's happening. So that is also the dynamic that is prevalent. Okay, the next non-state actor that we'll talk about is a social media. As is very, very apparent, the motivation for social media is nothing but sheer profit. Their objective is to provide consumers with a direct line of communication for engaging with each other. But the underlying objective is data mining for economic purposes, for market analytics, for trend forecasting in economic and markets, and for security purposes. They, in their interaction or negotiations with the government, in the past, government social media interaction was largely limited to security needs and socially unacceptable aspects. Now, increasing interaction with governments as the latter, that's the government enact laws to bend social media outlets to their own petty political agendas. What should be the most effective way of working? They should be independent of government agendas, allow free speech, except in the case of extreme violence, child pornography, terrorism, etc. The next non-state actor is in trust groups, and examples of that are women's right groups, environment interest groups, etc. Now, the motivation for most interest groups is betterment of societies, but there are also interest groups which could also have covert agendas of the sponsoring body or the one organization which is funding it. The objective is to affect government policy in order to benefit the people, specific population cohorts, themselves or their causes, and in certain cases, there are also covert agendas, jobs, economics, resource exploitation, etc. Interaction, negotiation with a government. Interest groups normally remain at loggerheads with parts of the government. For example, if you look at environmental interest groups or environmental protection groups, climate change groups, they are generally at conflict with the developmental agendas of most governments. And in some cases, some of the interest groups are covertly supported by government agencies also. For example, some race groups in certain countries are being supported by some government agencies or the other. The next non-state actor we can talk about is the lobbying firms. Examples are given over there. Their motivation is profit, as also the covert agendas of the government that's sponsoring them, or the sponsoring body or the organization that is funding them for a particular cause. The objective is to alter the target country's government's economic, political, and foreign policies. They also have a covert agenda or sponsoring of the parent sponsor. For example, the building of a coalition was based on the false or the fake narrative of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So the lobbying firms which are responsible for that, you are well aware that the girl who appeared and said that most of the hospitals with the children's hospital destroyed was actually the daughter of the Saudi ambassador. Now, how do they interact or negotiate with the government? Most lobbying firms are usually flush with funds from various governments or organizations that are sponsoring them, and they operate at multiple layers, that is public, social media, electronic media, government officials, and politicians, and also use soft power tools to realize the agenda that they have been recruited to deliver. The next non-state actor are hate groups. Now, examples are race groups, supremacist groups, left-wing, right-wing, anti-government, anti-LGBT, anti-immigrant, anti-women, anti-vaccination, etc. Their motivations basically stem from personal or group belief system. Their objective is to encourage or spread discrimination against the target segments and spread hatred of those targeted segments, as also advancement of their people, the othering of those being discriminated against. In their interaction, negotiation with the government, they are usually at odds with most government bodies and progressive groups. At times, such hate groups are covertly sponsored by parts of a ruling regime for political and electoral benefit. The next non-state actor that we can have a look at are private military companies. Classical examples are Academy LLC, which is the erstwhile Blackwater or Z, the Wagner Group, and the infamous NSO Group of Israel, which were the makers of the software called Pegasus, which was used extensively to penetrate various groups, including politicians, etc. Now, their motivation of the private military companies is essentially profit and personal enrichment. The objective is to conduct covert operations or wage war on behalf of a sponsor while giving that sponsor plausible deniability. Their international negotiations with the government are through covertly sponsored, funded through slush covert funds, or by businesses and oligarchs. For example, the Academy LLC is funded by the US government. The Wagner Group is being funded in Russia by an oligarch. Most of these PMCs operate with a very low moral threshold and at times also tend to get involved in crime. For example, in gun running, drug smuggling, hostage taking, blackmail, etc. The last non-state actor that we look at are terrorist entities. Their motivations are stem from radical ideologies which appeal to the person or the groups, and they have very narrow political objectives. The objective is to spread those radical ideologies, seek revenge for a government's policy or policies, directly force a government to agree to demands, spread hatred against communities or a community by ensuring retaliation by a particular community. Now, this is an important issue. For example, a particular terrorist entity belonging to a particular community will commit an outrageous violent act against another community, which will then retaliate against the community to which the terrorists belong. This in turn ensures recruitment by the terrorists to their cause. Now, we come down to interaction, negotiation with governments. Now, there are two sides to this. One is a sponsor nation, which is sponsoring the terrorist entities. They provide covert support to many of these terrorist entities. You're well aware of the cases where many terrorist entities have been supported by various countries. The government of the targeted nation, that is the nation that's been targeted by those terrorist entities, on the other hand, uses all means to try and end the entity. Notably, about 43% of all terrorist entities have been ended through a political process. Now, this is based on a RAND study of roughly about 1,000 or little less than 1,000 terrorist entities and how they ended. And the findings are very surprising. It was found that just 7% ended through the use of armed forces. In some, the armed forces were found to be a very blunt tool. The maximum, that is 43%, were ended through a political process. As has been mentioned, they have very narrow political objectives. And 40% were ended through the use of local police and intelligence agencies. And just 7%, like I mentioned, through the use of armed forces. Now, in their interaction negotiation, the government, the media acts as a terror amplifier. Now, how do most terrorist entities function? Terrorism is a tactic of the weak. It's used by non-state actors who want to confront a militarily superior enemy but lack the power to impose their political will through ordinary political or military means. So there is sought to terrorizing the people. As the word suggests, their attack or terrorist designs are intended to have a psychological impact far outweighs the physical damage the attack causes. And terrorism is an enduring reality. A number of countries, including the United States, USSR, Russia, UK, France, Germany, Pakistan, South America, and African countries have patronized terrorist entities to further their own national interests. And media and social media and the terrorists, they feed into each other and share an incestuous relationship. The media thrives on negative acts, and the terrorists, they thrive on publicity. In the terrorist handbook, if you read, there is a very important phrase which is called propaganda of the deed, which means, in other words, that what the terrorist does, for example, setting off a bomb blast which just maybe kills 2 people or 3 people, or a shooting in insurgency or a terrorist zone in which 3 people are killed. 3 people getting killed in a nation is not a very great thing, in which, let's say, more people die of disease or in accidents. But this is how the propaganda of the deed functions. The aim is to give huge amount of publicity of the deed and terrorize the people. If you look at the ISIS, the video which had been put out, of the journalist being executed, he was dressed up in the same dress as those prisoners of the Guantanamo Bay, that the orange color, and the terrorist stood behind and gave a long speech, and after that cut off the neck of that terrorist, of that journalist. Now, most of us sitting in our drawing rooms were terrified because of that. Whereas just 150 years back, the main mode of fighting on the battlefield was cutting off each other's necks. And that is one way people died. But however, because you're watching this in 3D, in the confines, and we have become more genteel, the propaganda of the deed horrifies us, and that is how terrorism works. Now, till about 9/11 happened, terrorism was deemed a success as a tactics, but failure as a strategy. Now, 9/11 changed that dynamic. And today, in certain cases, a terrorist act can also be a success as a strategy. Okay. Now, with that, we come to the summation for non-state actors as individuals or organizations. Now, the first summation I would like to put across is that most non-state actors are organized political actors, but not directly connected to the state, but pursuing aims that affect vital state interests. They have powerful economic, political, or social power, are able to influence at a national and sometimes even international level without overtly aligning themselves with any particular country or state. And lastly, it's preferable that governments engage with them in one form or the other. With this, I finish and I thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to our excellent speaker, Brigadier Kuldip Singh. So, Brigadier Singh, I don't see any questions, so I will ask one. So, the system in terms of how do we keep accountability? We talk about World Economic Forum, for example. Karl Schwab boasts that he controls half the Canadian cabinet from his recruits. The leader of Finland, Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister. It seems like a good old boys club where people can get lots of money and perks to do the bidding of an oligarch, and a lot of the public seem to be wising up to it now and think, do we have real choice, whether it's the right or the left of politics? How do we keep accountability when we seem to see a lack of accountability and putting the nation first with organizations, umbrella organizations, whether it's the WHO, whether it's the UN or the WEC or the World Economic Forum, messing in internal politics? It seems that people, as they say, absolute power corrupts and power corrupts absolutely. What are your thoughts on that subject, sir?
That's quite a difficult question to answer. But you see, like if you take the case of media or politics, there's a very old saying, and that goes like this, that every people get the leaders they deserve. Every people, if you look at India, if you take the statistics of the people elected to the post of members of parliament, I'm not really aware of this, but at least 50% of them have criminal cases against them. So eventually it devolves down to the people to select leaders that they want. Like in the case of media, a lot of people, I also speak about at various forums on media management. And one of the questions that comes up to me is that how do we reform the media? I said, you cannot reform the media because humans have at some level venality embedded in them. Not all, but most of us have some level of venality embedded at some part of our DNA. It's present over there. So therefore, profit-making, etc., exploitation of others, it happens in animals, it happens in all human beings, is there. So many of these media channels thrive because people are watching them. So eventually, I think it is education of the people. Unfortunately, what is happening in most countries is they are confusing literacy with education. Whereas there's a very huge chasm between the two. Literacy is one thing. You may be a CEO of a technical company. That's literacy or expertise in one skill. Education is another ball game altogether. It's a very wide field in which the person involved who's educated is also having a worldview. He's sagacious, he's cerebral, he's tolerant of other people's views. That is education. Okay, unfortunately, we have managed to confuse in many of these countries, of the difference between literacy and education. And we think that these are the people. There is much to be thought out about Socrates, who said that only the educated must be allowed to vote. I'm not saying that should be done, but I'm just saying there's a thought, about what he said such a long time back. Perhaps we need to think about that.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful answer. Also, I think I agree with you about the media shaping the narrative in education, but who educates the educators? It's like one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So, for example, Black Lives Matter is a socialist Marxist group that hates Christians and obviously hates Jews, and yet found that the leaders actually made millions of dollars promoting race, and yet they didn't get the bad deal that, say, the January 6th insurrectionists got. Now we find out that that was manipulated by that people were waltzing through thanks to the Fox News story on January 6th. And now a lot of people have been illegally jailed due to 80% of the media, 85 being liberal. So we have a massive thing to overcome. If I could use the example, a giant company called BlackRock owns both Pfizer and they, of course, own Discovery Channel, our Television 3 in New Zealand. So it's very easy to shape a narrative if you control the purse strings. So it seems like mission impossible to be able to overcome some of these issues.
I absolutely agree with you. That is why, if you notice during my presentation, I have listed out that in most cases, the underlying motive is profit of most non-state actors. They exploit emotions of people in order to make a quick buck for themselves and enrich as also empower their own selves.
Excellent again, sir. Thank you so very much. I noticed just one question on hate groups. You mentioned anti-vaxxers. Well, that's again something that could be framed because we've had guests today that testify a lot of people have suffered vaccine injury around the world due to the nature of things being rushed out. So we had protests outside our parliament about vaccine mandates, and they used the phrase anti-vax, almost like shutting down the conversation. So I guess we have to be careful how we define hate groups. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter in an open democracy.
By anti-vaxxer groups, I did not only limit myself to COVID. What I meant was that there's a very broad spectrum of people who are against all kinds of vaccination. Now, you are well aware of the Pfizer case and what's going on and what is being said about the COVID-19 vaccine, that it was useless, etc., and all that. Now, but there are groups which are totally opposed to all kinds of vaccination. So that's what I meant.
Thank you for clarifying, sir, because it's obviously just the one line. I appreciate you gave some context to that. So again, thank you. We'll give a big round of applause to Brigadier Kuldip Singh, ladies and gentlemen. Now we can move on to our next presentation. So we're very grateful for our next presenter, who of course has joined us from Malawi, where it was very early for her to be up. I would like you to give thanks to our Member of Parliament from Malawi, Joy or Joyce, I hope I can pronounce it right, Chuzulu. And so grateful to have you here this morning, madam. The floor is yours when you're ready to take over.
Good morning.
Good morning, we can hear you.
Good morning from Malawi.
We can see you, a bit staticky with the communication, but it's good to see and hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me first of all apologize the fact that we have Cyclone Fred in Malawi and it has caused a lot of damage and we don't have electricity since yesterday, so I'll not be able to use my laptop. So I'll use my phone. I hope it's going to work. I will talk about the issue of non-state actors and issues to do with the policy. I was listening to the speaker that has just finished presenting, and I was keenly following, and I just wanted to comment on the part, or to present on the part of Malawi on what we have done in terms of the policy and the law as regards to the non-state actors. What I will start with, first of all, is the fact that in Malawi, we also had been facing, some challenges as regards to issues of, I wouldn't really say controlling, but maybe like making sure that the media or the non-state actors are acting responsibly. So what we did, first of all, before I come to what we have done as a country in terms of how we have managed to, work together with non-state actors by using the policies and the laws that we have, I would also want to highlight a few things that in Malawi, when you talk of non-state actors, we are looking at institutions like the media, which is private, both print and electronic, but we also have the social media, platform, we also have the religious leaders who also play, religious institutions who also play a greater role in terms of, the affairs of the country. For example, we have what we call the Public Affairs Committee, which is composed of various churches who also act as, they provide checks and balances on government. And we also have what we call the non-governmental organizations, that's the civil society, that are private. They don't get funding from governments, who also they also provide checks and balances on government. As a country, we felt that we needed to have legislation which will guide, how these so what we did, we have a law which guides. First of all, we have an institution which we call the NGO board, non-government organization board, which was set by an act of parliament. And we have just done a review of it. And what the NGO board does is to make sure that it sets out rules and it makes sure that all non-state actors are registered by the board so that they follow, like they're guided by the NGO board so that they don't do their things, out of hand, but they also need to follow what our policies and what the rules are saying. We also have what we call the Council for Non-Governmental Organization, in short, Kongoma, and each and every non-governmental organization is supposed to be registered by Kongoma. And like I've said, it's also it also helps to make sure that all non-state actors are being guided by that. However, despite having the NGO board in Malawi and Kongoma, but also having what we call the NGO Act, an act which was passed by Parliament to make sure that it regulates the work of the NGO board, we still have other challenges that we are facing. I'll start with issues to do with the media. Yes, we have the policy, but we noted of late that in Malawi, most media houses are used to propagate, maybe hate speech, which may even cause some violence. I remember when there was anti-government demonstrations, normally media houses are used to make sure that they want people to go and demonstrate against government, and they make sure that maybe if, they're banning things, they beam so that people know how, the demonstrations are going on, which in a way, it promoted, hate, violence, and the like, because then people would say, this is what our colleagues are doing in this city, let's also do the same. And the media has also been used, despite having our policy, to make sure that it also, targets negatively some politicians. You find that they spread maybe fake news about politicians just to campaign them. Even during political campaigns, you find that most of the times it's a media house that, spread such kind of hate speech by aspirants, and basically they were causing a lot of chaos, but also some other inconveniences on the part of the politicians themselves, but as a country as a whole. So what happened was that having noted that, and that includes, when I say media, it also includes the social media. Normally you find that social media spreads fake news to people, which is really, not good. And for that reason, we came up as a parliament with what we call the Cyber Act. Cyber Act is the act which was passed by Parliament, and it regulates the work of people in the social media and the media, so that at least whoever spreads news that is not true should face the law. And we have seen of late in Malawi that people have become responsible because of the policy, the law which is in place. We have seen that people have become responsible and they are not really much using social media negatively, or the media negatively, because they know once they do that, they will be sued. So at least I feel that in terms of having that, passed by Parliament, having that act in place, it has actually helped Malawi, especially journalists or people using media, to make sure that they are careful, because once they mess up, definitely the law will be on them. We have also seen, apart from the Cyber Act, as I've said, we have the NGO Act, which also regulates how civil society organizations and NGOs are working. That also applies to the church groupings that I've mentioned on earlier, to say those first groups, like the Public Appointments Committee, also have to be responsible. They just have to make sure that they have, evidence on everything that they'll be saying to avoid conflicts. But also, what we have done as a country to make sure that we have the Access to Information Act passed by Parliament, which is in place. And the act helps that people should be able to access information, because sometimes, yes, we blame, the media, the church groupings, the CSOs, but then eventually maybe it's us, maybe or government or politicians who do not want to, give the right or correct information or give out information to the media. So what we have done as Parliament, we also passed what we call the Access to Information Act. And that being in place, it's helping to guide the non-state actors and also government and all those involved to make sure that they access the information that is required. And there are procedures, of course, that are followed, but that has helped, because now you are unable to hide information, because the law is there and there are penalties for one who doesn't want to give out information if requested. So I feel that it's also regulating well the non-state actors in terms of how to get information, but also as the duty bearers, it's also guiding us to make sure that we provide to the people what they are requiring from us, because they need, that. So those are some of the acts, the Cyber Act, the NGO Act, and the Access to Information. Those have also, helped to make sure that the relationship between, the non-state actors and the government itself is well, and making sure that everything is regulated to avoid bringing in conflicts if they were left, unattended. If there are no law in place, no policies in place, that would have been dangerous. And also, the government has set aside the Ministry of Gender as a mother ministry for all the non-state actors. So all non-state actors, in terms of reporting, they report to Ministry of Gender as the aligned ministry, so that at least the ministry regulates the work of the non-state actors. Our fear is that like, for example, in the constituency where I'm coming from, we border Mozambique, and there are high cases of, conflict, human trafficking, and the like. So these actually, laws, by regulating the media, it's also, helping positively somehow, because the media is also useful in terms of reporting. They report whenever they see cases of, maybe human trafficking or some other issues, as being at the border. So we feel that, yes, negatively, some, non-state actors have, been conducting their work, but there are also some positives. Another issue is in terms of the positives, or what we have seen as a positive side of the non-state actors, is the fact that government is able to be held accountable. Because now, whenever things happen, the non-state actors would come in and say, this is what the government was supposed to be doing, and you haven't done it this way. So that has also helped us in terms of providing checks and balances on government, which is really commendable. And I believe that if it were not for the faith groups, if it were not for the civil society organizations, if it were not for the youth groups and all that, and the media, I believe there would have been a lot of issues that government would have been doing in a wrong way, without being, put to question, or without being questioned, because then there wouldn't have been anyone exposing that. So what has happened now is that the policies or the acts that are there are also helping to make sure that government is being held accountable. For example, in Malawi, we have a lot of cases of corruption, and that's a big challenge that we have as a country. Yes, we are a poor country, we admit, but most of our resources are wasted through corruption. So if it's the media and the church groups and the civil society organizations, the NGOs that actually come in and say, no, we have realized this, or we have noted this, and they they put it out in the media, and definitely the anti-corruption bureau takes it up, or people take it up to say, no, government, you have to explain this and that. So it's also really helping the other, in the other sectors as non-state actors. Even some other NGOs are really doing good in terms of sensitizing people on human rights. We have others that are anti-drug and crime. They are working on anti-drugs and crime, which is also really important. They go out sensitizing people in the villages, which is really positive in terms of the United States actors. So all in all, I would say we have had positives, but also challenges. But with the policies that we have, the acts that we have in place now, it's been regulated, and I feel that we are making progress, and we are seeing that there are a lot of positives coming out. That's why maybe in Malawi, it's a peaceful country. I wouldn't say we have a lot of conflicts. No, I wouldn't say that. But the thing is, people are now able to differentiate between the fake, the right thing. They would know that if I report wrongly, I'll be, arrested because of the Cyber Act. But they also know that as leaders, as non-state actors, they are there to complement government efforts and not fighting government. So at least we have seen some, sanity on the especially in the media and the church groups, because before it was a bit chaotic. So in brief, my sincere apologies. Like I've said, I can't use my laptop. We don't have electricity, but that's what I can briefly present. And that's also helping us politicians, as members of parliament, to make sure that we are responsible. Because we know if we mess up, definitely the non-state actors will take us on, and definitely they will expose us. So normally, even in terms of using funds for development, we are so careful because we know now that we have these laws in place, they will be on us. Let me end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy. We appreciate you being up so early and giving such an inspired presentation against the odds with no laptop during a cyclone. We've had a fair bit of inclement weather, not much of a summer over here in New Zealand. So thank you. I'd just like to ask a question. You've got laws in place because there's been a lot of debate over Facebook and being a publisher in the United States, and some say it's abused its status and allowed people to get away with mischief. So what do you do when people are publishing fake news or stories from another country? How can you put law against people when they can do it internationally from outside the country to enforce it against them?
That's a very good question. In Malawi, yes, we have also challenges with people posting, fake things on Facebook, maybe even some things against other people on Facebook that are not true. And with the Cyber Act, what the Malawi police is doing now is to make sure that they, follow the one who has posted that. I know some use fake names, but the police, the special investigation branch, do their investigations. And once they catch the person, they have them arrested. And normally what they advise to do is to put down the post, but they are also given, a jail term. I know some 3-4 cases in Malawi where that happened. Someone posted bad about, another person, which was not true. And that actually happened. Now, because of that, people are now afraid. We no longer have a lot of cases of people, saying bad things about people posting on Facebook because they know the law is there. And there's been a lot of sensitization on that act. So at least, but normally that's what the police does. And the case is between state and the accused person. That's how it's happening.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate your answer. And I saw the hand was raised of Brigadier Singh. I'm sure he will give you some great insights and ask a deep and meaningful question as well. The floor is yours, Brigadier Singh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce, for such a lovely presentation. I have a question. You have a law now, like in many of the countries, against fake news.
Yes.
But who decides what is fake and what's not? Is that an autonomous body or an independent body comprising segments of society, or is it just the police? Because my experience, I've also been as part of the Joint Intelligence Committee in India, at the National Security Council, and one of the perceptions is that in many countries, the fake news sometimes are also those are deemed as those which go against our government or the incumbent government. So who really decides?
That's a very good question. Normally, it's both sides in Malawi. Sometimes people spread fake news about people in opposition, and sometimes they do that on government. So whoever feels that this has actually injured me, they definitely report that to police, and the police picks it up. But normally, what happens is that once the police, for example, there was a time I remember people wrote on Facebook that a government minister has stolen money for fertilizers or some fertilizer subsidy or something like that. The news was fake. So what the owner did is to screenshot that post and then report it to police, and the police took over the issue to investigate who that was, and the person was arrested. So normally it's the one who feels injured who takes it up. Or sometimes what happens is that, for example, if it's me, someone writes about me, which I feel is not true, I take it up with the police, and then they proceed, they go to court, and, a sentence is passed. So normally that's how it works. Yeah.
The question I'd like to ask then is, I think there's a theory from ancient Greece, the strong do what they will and the weak do what they must. I guess some people wouldn't have the means to get a good lawyer, for example. I'm just creating a scenario, Joy. So for those that perhaps cannot have the financial means to get a good lawyer because the person that feels aggrieved has got more money, the resources of the state, the concern is this can also be abused to shut down free speech that is true, not to hold, say, politicians accountable. So I guess it can swing both ways. So, with regards to that side of the equation?
Well, that's a very good question. But in Malawi, we have what we call the Legal Aid Bureau. And the duty of the Legal Aid Bureau is to make sure that it provides lawyers to people who don't have capacity to hire lawyers. So normally, even if those people are sued, they get access to the government lawyers that are for free, from the Legal Aid Bureau. So, yes, I appreciate the fact that those politicians have money, they can influence even the police. But when it comes to the courts, and they have those, accused have those free lawyers with them, at least it helps. And normally, we have never had a case where the one accused went away with it, because normally those are straightforward things. People got excited in Malawi with the coming in of Facebook, WhatsApp, and they kept on spreading fake, news. So I think now, because we know that this is wrong and we are not supposed to do it, at least the cases are not many. And normally, like I've said, they use the legal aid lawyers that are for free for those that are, underprivileged and they can't have an access to a lawyer. Normally, that's what we do.
Thank you very much, Joy. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. Do we have any other questions that would like to ask Joy or any of other panelists that are still here, like Dr. Eddie and Brigadier Singh? Well, if there's no more questions, I would like to turn the floor over to Professor Abbott to do her wrap-up as we close this big day. It's been very insightful having so many different people from so many different backgrounds. The floor is yours, Professor Abbott.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy.